Hi, Nicole. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Christine. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I am so excited for this conversation today, where I was thinking about I've known of your work for 2 decades, and we only met on Zoom a few months back. I've always wanted to ask you about your career and your story, so I'm really honored you're on the program today.
Yeah, I'm pleased to be here. And likewise, I have known about your career for quite a long time as well.
Thank you, Nicole. And I had warned you going into these conversations. The hardest question I'll ask you is the first question, because it's asking you to take your entire career
Yeah.
over the years and summarize for me and for us your journey.
Yes, I guess my career journey actually, I didn't have very many jobs. So, from that point of view, it's not a very complicated journey. But I graduated from high school in 1978. And then I went to Brown University, where I stayed and I worked at Brown for 9 years after I graduated. And I helped to found a research institute there called the Institute for Research in Information and Scholarship, which was known as IRIS. So I worked there from 1982, which was actually a year before I graduated as an undergraduate, to 1991. So that was kind of what launched my career. And I'm self-taught in pretty much everything I've ever done. So I have a undergraduate degree in political science. So it was nothing that I really studied in college that I ended up doing. So then eventually the Research Institute at Brown ran out of money. And so I got like a real job after that. In 1991, I started at Sun Microsystems, and I stayed there until I was laid off in 2010. And while I was there, I ran, I guess, four different research groups. I focused on speech applications and collaborative computing mainly. I ended my career there working on 3D virtual worlds, but again, for the purpose of collaborating in a business environment. And then I did a brief stint. I started a startup called Wonder Builders. I started that in 2010. The company closed in 2014. So about 4 years it did that. And in 2013, I started photographing my daughter's sporting events. So that was sort of my beginning of getting involved with photography, was just as a soccer mom, basically. And in 2014, also, my mother got sick, and that's when we closed our startup. And I was just photographing soccer, taking care of my mother. And I did a little bit of UI consulting work for a couple of years there. And then in 2016, I really started photography in earnest as a professional photographer. And I started a little company called Create with Photos. I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. Part of what I transitioned to in Create with Photos, I mean, I started as a professional photographer and kind of ended up more as a teacher. So at this point, I'm doing a lot of one-on-one instruction, teaching photography and photo editing.
So
Yeah.
much to unpack here. And I'm taking
Right.
notes, Nicole. I'm wondering, when you were talking about studying political science in college and didn't take that track, can you speak a little bit to that? Do you have an intention when you were studying political science, and what shifted things, if
Well,
so?
I had always been interested in traveling
Mm,
and foreign affairs and things like that. I was interested in the world, I guess, and it seemed like the thing to do.
mhm.
I did an internship after between my sophomore and junior year. Did two internships, one for a senator and one for a congressperson.
Mhm.
And what that taught me was that I hated politics. When I came back to school, I was living with some friends, and they were doing an independent study project with the chairman of the computer science department, designing a computers and society course. And so they said, well, I could live in the house with them, but I had to take their course. And that's what launched me down this technology path, was taking that course and meeting the professor, Andy Van Dam, who became my mentor. So I really just sort of fell into it. And I mean, after working in the Congress, I was like, I want nothing to do with it. This
I
is not for me.
I had wondered, thank you. I had wondered as you know, I've been talking with many women about their careers and what they've learned along the way. And a theme that keeps coming up in terms of a career trajectory was that sometimes there are these happy accidents that happen in life where,
Yeah.
how could you have ever predicted you'd take this class and meet your mentor? Things just, I wonder, Nicole, is there a lesson you took from that? Like, one thing that's come up is trying new things, or like,
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
your
I
thinking?
think to me, I have never I've never been one that had planned out my career. Everything has basically been a happy accident.
Yeah.
And I think that what the main lesson that I take from this is that I'm the sort of person that I don't do a lot of planning, but I do a lot of seizing the opportunities. So when opportunities present themselves, I do tend to take them. And I think one of the biggest lessons to me, and the thing that's worked for me over and over again in my career, is the act of raising your hand and volunteering to do things has always led to good outcomes.
I'm wondering, when we first met and spoke, we talked a little bit about Wonder Builders. What was the charter behind the startup and what was the story there?
Yeah. So, we had a pretty good inkling that we were going to get laid off from Sun
Mhm.
because Sun had been acquired by Oracle.
Okay.
And even though we had gotten some assurances from upper management that we weren't going to get laid off, I didn't really believe that. And fortunately, but so anyway, so a number of the people on my team, we had sort of talked about like, what are we going to do if we get laid off?
Mhm.
And we had talked about doing this startup together. So essentially, my husband kind of jokes about this. I literally started the startup the day we got laid off, because, I did it with people that I had already been working with. And we just took the technology that we were working on at Sun, and it was all done in open source. So we were able to just continue. And we negotiated with Oracle for actually the one thing we didn't have the rights to was the documentation. So they agreed to open source the documentation. So we could legitimately do this startup and not violate any legal agreements or whatnot. So we were just kept working on the project we were working on. It was completely self-funded. We had nice severance packages. And so we had our salaries covered for quite a few months after we got laid off. And we got customers right off the bat. These were people we had already been working with. As startups go, I'd say it was a fairly easy transition, working on the same project with the same people, just doing it on our own instead of with this big corporate structure behind us. But, I really did not like the lifestyle because, I went from working in this dynamic office to sitting at home alone. My colleagues who joined me in the startup were all in California. So I had nobody local to work with. And I just really didn't wasn't fun. So when my mother got sick, I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. And we just closed it.
Okay. One thing that's been coming up, I've been speaking to a lot of women. How do we describe ourselves? Some of us will say mid career, some of us will say senior career, whatever that really means. But it's been women who have been in the tech and business world for many, many years, and they're trying to figure out what's next, whether it's continuing along the same path or maybe pivoting to another area.
Mhm.
I would love to hear your lessons learned. Can you share a little bit about that inflection point that you've experienced in your life and what was happening and how you got through it?
Well, nothing was really planned. I just
Yeah.
sort of thinking about what to do. When my mother was recovering from her surgery, I just felt like I couldn't look for a full-time job. She needed too much help. I needed something more flexible. The other thing was that after 4 years of doing this startup, my joints were in such bad shape. And, the doctor said it was because I was spending too much time sitting behind the computer. I needed something to do that did not involve sitting in front of a computer. And I had been doing photography, and my daughter went off to college. So I had way fewer kids' sporting events to photograph. So I took all these online photography classes. I went to, there was a startup in the Boston area called Pepper Lane, which is a platform for women-owned businesses. And I heard about it, and somebody encouraged me to go to a meeting. So I went to this meeting. I took my camera with me. I took photographs at the meeting. And then after the meeting, I sent the photographs to the woman who was the founder of the company who was running the meeting. And I said, thought you'd like these to have these. I really had no expectations, but she almost immediately turned around and hired me to do marketing photos for them and also to photograph their conference events. So it was like all of a sudden, I'm a professional photographer.
That's a
That was
switch
it.
in identity too. I bring my camera to my son's sporting events. I haven't made the leap to becoming a professional photographer. There's something about you said, and I know it was a happy accident. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to take photos for my
Right.
photography career. But I'm hearing a theme that you do take action, you do take opportunities, this notion of action. So even just the story of how did you have a professional camera when you first started going to your daughter's sporting events?
Yes, actually, there had been a mom who was taking photos the year my daughter was a freshman, and then her daughter graduated. And my husband just went to Costco and he just bought a Nikon camera off the shelf and he says, okay, you're now the team photographer. And so I had no idea how to use this. And I took photos of their first scrimmage and every single photo was blurry. And I took like some days off from work and I consumed every sports photography video that the internet had to offer. I used my dog as the subject and I taught myself sports photography in 3 or 4 days. And so that was, I just did it because I wanted the kids to have the good pictures. So I had no intention of doing this as anything other than a hobby. And even taking the pictures at that event for the Pepper Lane people, it never occurred to me that this woman would offer me a job.
Yeah.
I really didn't go into it thinking that. I just thought, well, I thought it was a nice thing to do to support her effort. That was really what I was thinking of.
This is was your husband the coach of the team when he said, okay, Nicole, you're the
No,
photographer? Oh, so he just said, okay, you're taking this on.
yeah. He had coached her previously when she was,
Okay.
but not in high school. They had a professional coach in high school.
You may be surprised. It's so funny when we talk about happy accidents, but I've had enough of these conversations now where there's something about you mentioned this would be a passion project or a hobby. You also described when this was a task at hand, you took a little time off from work and so from your real job
Right, right.
to learn all the skills. And one thing that's been coming up, a lot of people have intention and desires to do something, but that's different than taking this 3 to 4 days to become.
Right.
Like, is that just something you've always had intrinsically that if you're asked to do something, you're going to
Yes.
do it well?
Yes. I'm very compulsive in that way. And that, I guess, to me, I guess that's sort of my message to other people is like, you need to seize opportunities and also focus on the things that you enjoy doing. I love being out there. I've never been a sports fan,
Yeah.
but it was my kid and I loved watching her play, but it really helped me to have a job. And I was there. It's like, it's hard for me to just to go to a sporting event and just watch it. But to go to a
Mhm.
sporting event and photograph it gave me something to do. It gave me a reason to interact with the kids. And, it was a great experience and really enjoyable. And so it was something I decided, I could do more of this even when she's gone. And just photographs make people happy, and
Mhm.
I photograph a lot of events as a volunteer. And I love just giving the pictures to people and having them remember the event and feel good about it.
Are you? I'm wondering, there's a very different identity associated with being a professional photographer versus your career in tech is building at Sun, building research teams. And are you missing your career in tech? And if so, in what ways?
Yeah, yes and no. Honestly, the thing that I miss the most is lunch. I had these amazing colleagues at both Brown and at Sun, and we'd always have lunch together. And, they were just the most interesting, well-educated, knowledgeable people. And it was just that kind of social interaction is really the thing that I miss. In terms of the technology itself, honestly, there's not that much difference between photography and the tech field. I mean, in my job where I was doing research, we're constantly learning new technology. I found that I was able to leapfrog a lot of people who have been doing photography for years and years because of my ability to learn new technology really quickly.
Mhm.
And I teach photo editing. So in my tech career, I did a lot of image editing and graphic design and used all the tools basically that I'm using now for photography. I use them in a different way, but still learning them for me was much easier than it is for a lot of other people. There's not
Agreed.
that much difference in fact, I just worked on a project with this other guy, fellow photographer, who he had worked for a company called Pixel Stick inventing this light painting tool.
Mhm.
And so he and I have been collaborating on doing some light painting sculpture installations
Oh,
at the
wow.
Lexington Arts and Crafts Society. And I feel like working with him is a lot like working with my gang, back at Sun. Um,
It's really I appreciate hearing that perspective, Nicole, because one thing that's been coming up when I'm talking with women who are thinking about big, massive pivots,
yeah,
what we actually start talking about is possibly having a mindset shift and reframe where if we look at your career trajectory going from big tech and
yeah,
Sun to professional photographer, from the outside, it's like, oh, massive, massive
right.
pivot. But the way you were sharing the story and what we talk about, what I talk about with these women, it's oftentimes taking skills and talents and zones of genius that you cultivated for years, but bringing it to a new area. And it very much sounds like did you view this as a huge pivot or just taking skills and using it
Yeah,
elsewhere?
no, it didn't feel like a huge pivot. What I loved about my job and what I love about photography is that I get to learn something new just about every day. I'm constantly learning, I'm constantly improving my skills or learning some new piece of technology or whatever. And with AI, oh my gosh, I mean, the field is changing almost overnight. Things that you can do with the photo editing. So I follow all these photography technology blogs and video YouTube channels and whatnot. Honestly, it really doesn't feel that different what I'm doing. And also, my clients discover pretty quickly that I have good technical skills.
Yeah.
And so I end up being kind of their IT support as well as their photography instructor.
Is that what you want to be doing?
No, that is not what I want to be doing. And I tell them that, but I do it anyway because I feel like if their computer system gets screwed up, then it's going to impact their ability to edit their photos. So I'd much rather help them out a little bit in that regard. If they need like major help, I'll try to find somebody else to
Mhm.
do it. But I like to get everybody a good backup system and make sure their software's updated and things like that. So I do like little IT chores with them.
Can I
Um,
ask you too? Like, I'm really interested in your perspective. It's a little bit of a departure from talking about career pivots for
yeah.
women, but I'm really interested in your expertise as a technologist and what's happening in the AI space and photography, where, and some background and context, Nicole, there's some people back in the product UX world where they're saying there's so many opportunities with AI. There's other pioneers from the UX product world saying, I guess your lens
It's not
from
a fad. It is not a fad. They're
they're wrong. Yeah.
they're living in a world of illusion if they think that AI is changing everything. I mean, it's a game changer. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, I use Chat GPT every day, and it's amazing. It's an
Yeah.
amazing tool. But in terms of photo editing, what you can do today is dramatically different than what you could do a year ago, even. They're applying AI to everything. It's really a game changer. There's no going back. I'm using it for more and more things, but I started out with the thing that I struggle the most with in my photography is naming my photos.
Okay.
I have, like all my photo names are just like really boring. Purple flowers and mountains. I
Mhm.
call it something like this. And so I just type in the description of my photo. I say, I need a name for a photo. And, it shows a scene in Canada with purple flowers in the foreground and beautiful mountains in the background. Can
Mhm.
you suggest some names? And I get a dozen names to choose from. And I often don't pick one of those dozen names, but it like gets me thinking along
Yeah.
those lines. And so it's been so helpful for me. And I actually find like now that I've been using it, I'm getting better at coming up with names
Yeah.
that a little bit more evocative than purple flowers and mountain.
Yeah, absolutely. You've described the role models and mentors and supportive managers you had along the way in your career. I first reached out because I was interviewing Jen McGinn.
Yeah.
And during the course of our conversation, she spoke so highly of you and your expertise and how you were there for her early in her career. And now she looks through an experience like that to give back to others in her career. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, what was your lens about being a role model and mentor? Was it because of the support you had you wanted to give back, or is that just who you are?
I feel like partially it is just who I am. I mean, I've always really enjoyed having interns and
Mhm,
it's very kind of Jen to say that. But and I feel like people like Kate Ehrlich, was so kind to me, when I first got to Sun and really helped me in that transition my first year there. So yeah, I like to help people when I can, and I feel like in some ways my one-on-one instruction now it feels like mentoring
mhm.
to some extent as well.
I had wondered about that when you were saying you're in your photography career, you have been shifting to teaching and instructing and
Yeah.
mentoring. Sounds like yet again, it's taking a skill and talent and something you love and bringing it to this new area.
Before COVID, I was doing a lot of event photography and some portrait work, and that just shut down really at
Mhm.
COVID. So I needed to do something else. I do quite a bit of volunteer work. I'm on the board of the Lexington Arts and Crafts Society, and I started off helping them kind of transition during COVID to all the gallery shows to putting them online.
Okay.
So part of what I did was I helped all of these artists figure out how to photograph their work. I started teaching people to do that. And then I realized, well, I really enjoy this kind of teaching. And so I just sort of pivoted to that. I had no choice. I couldn't continue with the event photography because that just wasn't happening during
Mhm.
COVID.
I had wondered, Nicole, one thing that's been coming up, and it seems like you're very much a natural connector with people. You mentioned favorite part that you're missing is lunch and being with
Yeah,
your colleagues. I have talked with people who are trying to figure out not necessarily pivoting, but growing in their career and looking for role models and mentors. And it's not necessarily going up to someone and saying, "Will you be my mentor?" Not
right.
do you have
Right.
recommendations for people who do want to be
Yeah.
connecting more and find people to learn from?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the best I can say is that if there are people who you admire and want to interact with more, the best thing to do is to volunteer to help them with something. Most people will take you up on that. And also, there's a lesson that I learned really early on in life from my father. He did public opinion polling and market research, and he would always tell me, he said, if you take a genuine interest in somebody and you ask them questions about themselves or about their work or the things that they care about, they're going to respond well to you. People will answer those kind of questions. And so I think that's has been very valuable advice in terms of how do you get these people who you might want them to pay a little more attention to you to pay attention. And it's really by being genuinely curious about them and their interests.
Mhm.
And if you just ask people that and offer to help them,
Yep.
that
I
they're likely to respond well to you.
appreciate that too. And what speaks to me is what you were saying, Nicole. It's genuine curiosity,
Yeah,
and a lot of these conversations may start for people looking for mentors or coaches. I hear you saying, like, look outward and
right.
genuinely care about what this person may need and who they are.
Yeah, people just, my father was just amazing at getting people to open up to him and talk to him.
Mhm.
And I think that was really his key was that, he just really was interested in people and took a genuine interest in what they were telling him and what they were all about. And just to understand them. And I have definitely found that it works.
Yeah.
And, if you want, like with Kate Ehrlich, you know, I didn't really when I started at Sun, they didn't really have a specific job for me. So I went to Kate and just said to her, if your group needs any help, just let me know because I'm not really doing that much right now. And she's like, oh yeah, we need a lot of help. And so for like a year, I I just helped out on projects that they needed help with.
There's
Yeah.
a theme, and I think when we put this out here, Nicole, seize opportunities. There's
Yeah.
a theme here. I had wondered with your we called it happy accidents, but again, it's you taking actions along the way and opportunities arise. I'm talking with a lot of women, and I told you we're describing ourselves in different ways. Some of the women are saying mid career, some are
Yeah.
saying senior career, some are saying midlife, some are saying seasoned, like we all have very different descriptions of where we're at. But there has been a theme for some of the women who didn't have all of the happy accidents yet, like you did, but they're feeling like the path they've been on is not the path they'd like to take for the next 5, 10, 15 years. And it may
Yeah.
be midlife, but
Right.
they haven't had those happy accidents. And I wonder, in addition to seizing opportunities and taking action, do you have any advice that sometimes feeling still a little lost and
Yeah.
knowing you're
Yeah.
not on the right path, knowing there's something more? What
Right.
can you say to these?
I think, trying things out. Again, volunteering is really powerful. Find some nonprofits are in such dire need of people who are, competent. I guess I'd say.
Yeah.
And, you can try things out in a volunteer capacity. And sometimes you realize, well, I really don't enjoy this work. So,
Mhm.
you weren't getting paid. So it didn't matter. You can just say, sorry, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Sometimes my husband, when he lost his job, he volunteered at this nonprofit to wire the schools for the internet, and they hired him.
Wow.
So he met people that he liked and so forth. So it's a way to get to know people. It's a way for people to get to know you. Maybe you may be out volunteering for an organization that you would like to work for, or you may just be volunteering for an organization with a type of work that you'd like to
Mhm.
do. I mean, and then you have a little bit of experience that you can put on a resume and, maybe recommendations from people or whatever. But I just feel like a lot of good things come from volunteering.
I think a lot about conversation that's been coming up, and you've talked about like finding your passions, finding your interests, but we've also talked about it's not just that. It's also about cultivating the skills that you built over your entire career. And I've been having conversations with women about this. Like we could go as a head of product and UX and start a yoga business, for example, and there's nothing wrong with that, but
Right.
have you cultivated the skills along the way to be ready for that passion? And it sounds like I don't know if it was with intention for you with some of these happy accidents, but it does sound like you've been considering how do I best use my expertise to move
Yeah.
forward?
Yeah, I mean, and because it's what I like doing. I feel so sorry for people who are in jobs that they don't like. I've always loved my work, always. And it just makes such a difference in how, I mean, you spend a lot of your time working. So, if you don't like it, life is not going to be very happy.
Yeah.
Uh, so it seems like it's worth trying to spend some time figuring out what you like and then figuring out how do I get some job that's gonna pay me to do the thing I like.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering, this may be an unfair question though, because I'm asking you to predict the future. And as you've said, it's not always about you knowing what's happening 5, 10 years down the line. It's you take action and you see what happens. But I'm wondering, Nicole, as you think about the next 5 to 10 years, where do you see yourself going in your career and life?
I'm quite happy with where I am right now, so
Yeah.
I'm not looking to make any moves. I do have a number of goals. I really am trying to I'd really like to be known as a top-notch photographer, and I'm really every day trying to improve my skills, and I'm applying to lots of juried shows and working on that. I'm lucky in that I worked hard and have enough savings that I don't really need to worry about the making money part of it at this
Yeah.
point. So I can just do what I really enjoy doing and I make enough money to buy a little bit more fancy camera equipment. I do a lot of photography just for myself, and
Mhm.
it's still exciting to me. Still really love doing it.
I wanted to get your take on one observation I've been getting from women who are going through. I have a cohort where women are going through reimagine your life or reimagine your career. And one of the
Yeah.
exercises we give them is they imagine two lives. One is if you keep going down the same path, but you're growing and expanding,
Uh,
what would that life be? And then there's the second, my audacious life, like going all in. This is what I want to do. This is what I love. If money were no object, and they put that together. And what ends up happening when people present the vision, they tend to keep going over to that first vision. But when
uh-huh.
they present the second one, they light up. They're full of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
But when we dig in, I'm curious your take here. Like many of these women want to go the full audacious big
Yeah.
vision, but there's fear. And I'm curious, like you've hit a point where the fear isn't really there in terms of abundance. Do you have any advice for these women?
There's a lot of things that I guess I sort of like dream about going to
Ah,
some great island paradise and just living among animals and things like that. But then I think about all the practical stuff. I really want to be someplace where I'm close to family and to medical
mhm.
care and things like that. So I get that fear for sure. There's a lot of things that hold us back from doing the audacious, but part of me thinks like maybe you can get a flavor of that. Do it for a month, not
Mhm.
not think about it as like I'm gonna actually move my whole life to the South Pacific. But maybe I could
Absolutely.
spend a month in the South Pacific and do that. So I think it's great to envision what that audacious thing is, and then try to figure out, can you have a little bit of both worlds?
Nicole, thank you so much for the time today. As I mentioned, I was so looking forward to this conversation. And I think my listeners, well, no, I know they'll get a lot of value from your story as well. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. I really enjoyed it.